Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another daily check-in. Good to have you here. Good to be here. And in today's check-in, I wanted to share something I started working on a few years back, which was in structuring and creating a practice around my own self-reflection. And the reason I needed a practice and some structure was because I wanted to make sense of it. I wanted to have a logical, rational explanation for how I was reflecting on who I believed I was in this world. And the way that I structured this was by breaking down my lifestyle into 4 different categories, 4 buckets. Now, bucket or category number 1 was my personal traits. These are the things that make me up, from my looks to how I speak to my little quirks, whatever it may be that I believe constitutes me, my being in this world, my physical presence. Category number 2, or bucket number 2, would be all of my accomplishments or actions. Now, accomplishments could be these big accolades, these successes, or actions could be my daily behaviors, anything that I exhibited on a daily basis. The third category would be all of my possessions, things that I had ownership of, and these were mostly material assets. So it could be a car, or this phone that I'm filming this video on, or a mic that I'm using to record this. Whatever it may be, I would take inventory of all of that I had in my possession. And then finally, the fourth category, or the last little bucket, would be all of my relationships. And by having these 4 categories, my personal traits, my actions or my achievements, my possessions, and then finally my relationships, I could start to see the big picture of who I was in the world to some degree. And in seeing who I was in the world to some degree, thoughts and feelings started to arise. If I had thoughts and feelings that were positive or that made me feel good and included, then I knew that those were meant to stay, that those were adding value and making my life worth living. If I had thoughts and feelings that were of me separating or wanting to remove myself, or made me feel somewhat paranoid or neurotic, or just felt like I was at war to some degree, then I knew that had to go. And it's interesting because if you think about your material possessions, for example, category number 3, anything that you can't afford, that's something that most likely needs to go, or you need to change your behavior. You need to make more money so you can actually afford it. And simply being able to rationally and emotionally reflect on that and then act on it is very powerful. Same thing happens with your relationships. If you're in a relationship that's not conducive for growth, then that relationship needs to either change or be removed from your life. Same thing happens with your actions or behaviors. If you behave or act in a certain way that is not conducive for your growth or is not creating peace around you, then you have the option to change that. You simply need to be willing. And then the first category, although it may sound very simple, there are certain personal traits that sometimes we don't like. Maybe there's something in our appearance that we don't like. And that's where, when you cannot change that, you need to learn how to fall in love with it, appreciate it for what it is. So it's a very powerful way of starting to reflect on who you are in this world, and thus creating change in the way that you relate to it and in the way that you actually navigate life according to them. And if you're someone who struggles to know whether you're having good or bad feelings, so to speak, imagine everything that you put into these 4 different categories and everything you took inventory, put on display for the world to see, meaning that became public knowledge. If there's an ounce of shame or hesitation, then you know there's a red flag there that's saying you need to work on this. And what I would encourage you to do if you go through this exercise is to start doing that work. This is what we call working on ourselves. And it's extremely valuable, not only short term, but also long term. And it's something that I found a ton of insight and value from, and I am excited to continue to share how I'm working on this, because it's very different now than the way it used to be. Before, it was all very big picture. It was this gross macro perspective. Now I get to play with the smaller things, the more subtle things. And those smaller, more subtle things, although may seem irrelevant in the big picture, once you start to change them and tweak them, they make massive changes and create a massive impact in the bigger picture. And that's something that I also look forward to sharing with you, how I do that in future videos. So for now, that was my check-in for today. Thanks for being here. Thanks for commenting and watching and engaging with me. As I've said before, it means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to being here tomorrow. So for now, over and out. Peace.